Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host, and today we're going to be talking about the 2026 Chocolate Scorecard from Be Slavery Free. I'm going to be doing an in-depth look about what it reports, to some extent how it reports it, what I think about the methodology, what I think about what's going on, and then in the end to give it a grade of my own. Right. But before we get there, I want to remind everybody that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. And this is the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. You can go there. And if you're not a member, you can click on the join button in the upper right-hand corner. There is always a free membership tier. There has been since the Chocolate Life started in January of 2008. But if you do have the resources to support the work I'm doing, there are monthly memberships beginning as little as $5 a month. And annual memberships can include consulting hours, and so you can support the work that I'm doing here. But with that, one final reminder, one final bit of housekeeping is no matter where you are watching in the world, you can go into the live chat on YouTube, you can go to the comments on LinkedIn and Facebook, and you can make a comment and you can ask me questions about anything that I might be talking about during the course of the hour. I'll get those questions up on screen, and then we'll be able to talk about them as well. So with that, let us go to the post for today's episode. So for every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, I put together a post. This is episode number 201, and we're focusing on the 2026 Chocolate Scorecard. And I'm just going to dive right into it. So the first thing I want to say to everybody is that, I've got a link to a source. This is the Chocolate Scorecard. This is what I'm going to be talking about today, right? But I also want to point out that, on Wednesday, so this is 2 days ago, this is Friday the 15th. So on Wednesday the 13th, I received an email. It's not signed. It's from the Be Slavery Free team. I'm going to guess it's from Fuzz Kiddo. Fuzz is often the signer of emails like this. And what he's saying, and let me make this a little bigger so that people can see it, is Dear Clay, every time you choose a chocolate bar, you're casting a vote. The companies that make your chocolate know it too, right? And he's saying, we don't guess, we Be Slavery Free. We don't guess, we measure, right? The Chocolate Scorecard is a rigorous, I added the emphasis here, annual assessment of the chocolate industry. Our questions are developed through consultation with NGOs and subject matter experts, right? And companies are given the opportunity to review the questions before the process begins. Responses are independently scored by 2 experts per topic across a 4-stage review process. So this is a meta description of the methodology. And immediately, there are a couple of things that pop up into my mind as questions. The first one of which is, yes, it may be a rigorous annual assessment, but you're only assessing what you choose to measure. And so the better question, in my opinion, is, are we measuring the things we need to measure, and are we measuring them appropriately? And I don't think so, right? So that's a spoiler alert. I don't think so. And then this other question, the companies, the people who are responding, who are being asked to respond to this survey methodology, are given the opportunity to review them before the process begins. And so my question to Fuzz or to anybody at Be Slavery Free who'd like to come on, I'm inviting anybody to come on and talk about this, is it just a review, or do they get to make suggestions? And since when do the respondents of a survey methodology of this kind get to determine what the survey instrument says? Now, that may not be true. It's not clear for me that this clear to me what review means. Does review means, oh, we get to push back against the wording, or we get to push back against something else? And so that's a question. So I do want to point out a little bit about the historical context. So the first version of the scorecard was published in 2020, and I would characterize it as an attempt by civil society actors to report on the efforts of companies involved in chocolate and cocoa. Those companies being traders, processors, manufacturers, large and small manufacturers, and retailers, and with respect to several key sustainability and ethical sourcing, ethical metrics, right? So the In the 2020 scorecard, 3 organizations, Mighty Earth, Be Slavery Free, and Green America, surveyed the world's biggest chocolate companies to find out this. I'm taking this from the 2020 scorecard. This guide breaks down company commitments and policies. It does not assess effectiveness or implementation. And that's key because they were just reporting on the policies of the companies, not the self-reported policies of the companies, not trying to assess whether the how implementation of those policies, implementation match those policies, and then never an attempt to say, well, what does the implementation mean in terms of real positive change or negative change, I suppose, on the ground, right? So it's really, really important to understand that, because one of the things that has changed over the course of the 7 years that this has gone on is that now they're also talking about policy implementation. They're talking about implementation. So can we measure the effects of changes in these policies and the implementation of these policies on the ground, right? So I'm, in this episode, straight up focusing a critical, skeptical lens on the claims being made. And I think that's important because I don't know anybody else who is going into a deep dive and taking a skeptical look, right, at the methodology which Be Slavery Free is using. And there are not enough hours in the day to do a real, granular deep dive into the methodology itself, right? But I don't know anybody who's going and saying, is this what we should be doing? Are they going about it the right way? If we take what it is that they're reporting, what does it mean, right? Is it valuable? Is it worthwhile? Is it useful, right? Does it motivate consumer behavior, changes in consumer behavior? Are people actually making buying decisions that are significant based upon, oh, I went and saw the chocolate scorecard and I'm completely changing what it is that I buy? I don't know that that's the case. And I think that that's one of the reasons why there needs to be a skeptical evaluation of what it is that goes on. It's also really important to understand that the questions are developed through consultations with NGOs and subject matter experts. And this is where I have a concern that the NGOs and subject matter experts involved, right, are primarily whether they primarily form an echo chamber, right? So are these people who already believe, right, in the methodology, in the approach, that this is the right way to do things, right? And so, I did a quick look, for example, and we have the Chocolate Scorecard team. So these are the organizations. You're not going to be able to read this, but what I did is I went and did the work to scrape the scorecard team page and to be able to extract the university partners, the NGO partners, and the funding partners that are listed on the page. And in some cases, there are URLs, and in some cases, there aren't URLs. But it occurred to me this morning as I was putting this together, what I need to do is I need to go and determine, of the NGO partners, what is their focus. So obviously, Be Slavery Free, their focus is going to be slavery and labor issues. And how many of the NGO partners fit into this category? And if these are the NGOs, the only NGOs that they're consulting, what does that mean, right? So are we in fact creating an echo chamber, and the NGO partners, the NGOs and industry experts they're consulting, do they already buy into what it is that we're talking about? And this is, we'll get into that, but these are some of my concerns, and I don't know anybody who's going and saying, okay, let's go take a deep dive and understand what's going on. So this is the homepage of the Chocolate Scorecard right now. We'll get into what it is, but already, number one, people, planet, and primates prioritized. No, this is obviously there for the alliteration, but hey, I got news for everybody down in Australia who is responsible for putting together this, that people are primates. And okay, well, primates may not be people. Humans, Homo sapiens, right, are primates, right? And give me a break, dudes, right? This is just lazy. right? It may be to everybody else, this is a small thing, but I think it's an indicative of an editorial framing that we need to be very, very careful of, very, very careful to examine. Right? This is, again, it's for alliteration purposes, I believe, but when you look at it facially, it makes zero sense. So that's a little bit of the historical context. And so here are some challenges that I have with the scorecard in general, and specifically the 2026 scorecard. Number one is the choice of categories. And when I say categories, these are going to be let's go take a look at it. Let's go take a look at this year's categories. We're going to check the scorecards. The scoring categories are traceability and transparency, living income, child and forced labor, deforestation, agroforestry and climate, pesticides and gender. So those are the categories. And what that does is that it assumes a particular theory of change, right? That if we can measure, right, these categories, so policies and implementation of these categories, we can affect a particular kind of change. And so the real question is, does this particular theory of change, right, when implemented in the way the scorecard implements it, right, result in meaningful change, right? And I understand the word meaningful there is doing a huge bit of work. So what do we mean by meaningful, right? And I would say that meaningful in this particular context means, are we have the companies who have been working here been able to address systemic issues related to to the lives and livelihoods of cocoa farmers and the sustainability of cocoa farms? And if the answer is yes, then that's a good thing. If the answer is no, then have they been able to implement meaningful change? But the notion of, for this particular theory of change, what does meaningful change mean? And I don't see anywhere where the organizers of this talk about this is what we mean by meaningful change, right? Let's stop there. Number two, I have an issue with the lack of publicly available sources, right? So many of the companies that are listed in the scorecard. So here are some of here are companies: Chocolate Alba, Tony's Chocolonely, Ritter Sport, C'est Moi, Mars Wrigley. These companies, most of them, if not all of them, produce annual reports which talk about their sustainability policies. They talk about the projects they're working on. These are especially if these are European companies, it's a part of their formal ESG reporting requirements. And one of the things that's completely missing from the scorecard are any links to anything. So there's no way for anybody who is interested in knowing, what are the publicly published policies of the number one rated medium and large company? Where can I go find out where they're listed? Right. Number one is do I go find out what the Chocolate Alba website is? Shouldn't be very difficult, but it's not a link here. And when I go look at the subpage, it's not linked there. This is a kind of institutional laziness on the part of Be Slavery Free. And it's not just institutional laziness on this page. It is institutional laziness on their Meet the Team page. So this is the Meet the Team page. So here we are. We have two university partners. We have the Open University. It's not linked to, right? The University of Wollongong, Australia. It's not linked to. Why not, right? Institutional laziness, the NGO partners. Most of these have links to them. So ACROF, why isn't it spelled out? It's an acronym. It's not going to take a whole lot. You need to go to the website and figure out what it is. But for example, if we look at this Blickfield Menschenhandel, it turns out that you may not be able to see this, but the URL is wrong. And if you were to click on it, it would take you back to a 404 page because the page doesn't exist. Why is that? The URL is malformed. That's why. And there are other ones that are malformed, right? But there are there are companies here. So the Josephite Counter Trafficking Project, the Sisters of St. There's no link. And the question is, why not? I want to go find out about this company. There's no way to do it. I went and I took a look and I was able to find the URLs for all of the missing companies. I was able to fix all the URLs. This was done with a URL, with an LLM prompt. It took me 15 minutes or so to go and figure out the inconsistencies in this. But there's still one organization, the Mercy Foundation, which turns out to be just a generic name. Which Mercy Foundation, right? I'm unable to determine which of the dozens or more Mercy Foundations that there might be in the world need to be done. There is a bit of data enrichment that need to be done to this list, which I need to classify them. So is one focused on slavery and labor issues? Which ones are agroforestry issues? Which ones are animal wildlife issues, like the World Wildlife Foundation? That needs to be done in order to be able to have a more complete understanding about the echo chamber, what I think of as an echo chamber of, we consult with NGOs about what's important, right? Because each of these NGOs, right, as a part of sort of the NGO universe, and a particular theory of change, has got a particular way of looking at things. And the Be Slavery Free, in my opinion, is just, what's the consensus of people who already believe the way we believe, right, about what we should measure and how we should measure it. So there is that. And then there's the executive team. Carolyn Kiddo, I'm sorry, Carolyn and Fuzz, I know that you guys organize Be Slavery Free, but there's no link to Be Slavery Free, and you're not actually acknowledged as being part of Be Slavery Free. I have no idea who Ruben Bergsma is or who he works for. Right now, I was able to do one or two, right, because there are a lot of people here. LinkedIn. Can I go on LinkedIn and find out who these people are? And it turns out that if I go to the Chocolate Scorecard team, I'm going and starting that effort. I want to find out who these people work for, right? So I can understand, are there any potential conflicts of interest here, right? So, okay, that's important. I don't know who Anna is. We don't know the advisory team. We don't know where any of these people work. We don't know who gets paid by whom. So that's another issue. Like, who are these people and why are they on the data integrity, ethics, and research team? Now, they might be associated with one of the two partner universities, which I can understand. So if this guy is in the Department of Ethics at Wollongong University, that might make sense, or the philosophy department, which is probably where ethics is being taught. I mean, but why? Why is there no indication of who these people are, right? When you guys, when I'm being by the Be Slavery Free team and the people who put together the methodology and do the ranking and rating, right, are able to name and shame companies and say, well, there's a lack of transparency, which means you're not committed, right, to reporting on this. You guys aren't either, right? There's nothing that you guys are doing that gives me confidence, right, in who these people are. This lack of this transparency. And by the way, there's no discussion of who's paying for this. We've got some funding partners down here, right? But we don't know, are they paying $1 million? Are they paying $2 million? How much money is being given to this project, right? Some of it comes from Be Slavery Free. I assume that's covering at least the salary costs of the Be Slavery Free staff members who are involved in this. But we don't know if there are any other sources of money, right? And how much money is being allocated to this project, right? So you guys talk about being open and transparent and talk about traceable, and you're not being open and transparent and traceable. Now, what I will say is that Be Slavery Free is incorporated in Australia under a tax law as a nonprofit, which says they have to do no financial reporting. So if you actually try to go and look with Australian tax and business authorities, and you want to find anything about them, you cannot. There is no reporting whatsoever about doing this. Listen, if I'm a publicly traded company, Barry Callebaut, at least they publish annual reports, right? And it turns out that some of the companies that are associated with this. So the expert knowledge scoring team. I know that Anthony Fountain, right, is at the Voice Network. And so I can look up the Voice Network, and the Voice Network is fairly open, right, in terms of publishing finances every year. But one of the things that I know from doing that is that the Voice Network receives money from the Tony's Chocolonely Foundation. I am not suggesting that there's anything nefarious there, that Tony's Chocolonely is buying the favor of um, the Voice Network in terms of what they're doing here. But that relationship is non-disclosed here. I mean, so for example, there's other people here. This gentleman, Friedel Hertz Adams, right? He, on the living income, he's a staff member of one of the NGO partners, right? And that's not mentioned. Now, I mean, there's no link here there's no mention of the Voice Network. There's no link to the Voice Network. You just have to know that. And I also want to point out to Fuzz and Carolyn, and everybody might do this. You see this person here, Pavritha Ram. Now, according to me and my research, because I went and looked her up on LinkedIn, and we have since connected, you've misspelled her name. And this misspelling has been there for quite some time. At least that's what it appears to me from looking at this compared to her LinkedIn profile. And I don't know why she's not complaining. But there is a radical lack of transparency and traceability when it comes to understanding who these people are, who they work for, what are the sets of potential conflicts of interest between these people, funding partners, NGO partners, right? These need to be disclosed. They should be disclosed somewhere, and they are not, right? And and what that does is it says, I got to take everything that you write about, right, and drop it down a couple of notches, because you guys are holding the people that you are judging to different standards than you're holding yourself, right? And that's a huge problem for me, and it should be a huge problem for everyone, right? So this is the lack of public available sources. There are no links to the home pages of any of the companies mentioned. Right, so these are the companies that are scored in the scorecard. There are links to some NGO partners, right? But there are not links otherwise. And there are no links to annual reports for any of the companies. So, we don't, it's just these, most of these companies, many of these companies do publish ESG reports, and we should not have to hunt for them. These should be part of your methodology. They're publicly available. You should republish them, publish links to them, right? Given the amount of effort that it takes to do everything else you're doing, just putting a couple of links on every one of these pages is a trivial amount of effort, especially because you should have gotten it already as a part of the interview methodology that you're putting together, right? We've already talked about there is no reporting on bee slavery funding, right? There's a total lack of visibility. We don't know if team members get paid. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. There's no policy on it, right? But there are some members of the team who are independent. There are some members of the team who are employed by NGOs, right? And I don't know if the NGO is contributing to this effort by lending the time of the team members at no charge to the project, but it's not disclosed, right? Right? And what efforts are undertaken to assure there are no apparent funding conflicts of interest, right? And there's nothing. I know that the Tony's Chocolonely Foundation, which is not Tony's Chocolonely, the corporate company, but Tony's Chocolonely Foundation, does give money to the Voice Network. Again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong, anything nefarious. I'm not saying that they're buying influence, but there is no disclosure of that funding relationship. And in this kind of effort, there should be, right? Right. This is very, very common when anybody does peer-reviewed research, academic research, funding conflicts, right? It's a part of every legitimate bit of research. There's another issue here, which is there's no analysis of impact on the ground. There's no saying, well, between the 2025 and the 2026, we see this change in reported behavior, self-reported behavior on the part of the companies, which has translated into X and Y and Z change on the ground, right? So, 20,000 farmers have been lifted out of poverty. 1 million children have been removed from illegal child labor. There has been a huge shift in consumer buying behavior as a result of what it is that they're doing. There's nothing about this. So, question number one, is it performative, right? The answer is we don't know, because there is no independent assessment, right, that's being done of the impact, the actual impact in key areas which are supported by this, right? And there's a clear lack of traceable history. So this is, something that I've brought up in the past. So the scorecard represents the category structure as being consistent from the 3rd edition to the 7th, which is not the case. And I'll show you how that presents itself. So if I go to the scorecards page, and I go take I'm still on, if I go to the scorecards page and I go to Chocolate Alba and I click on this right arrow, right? We will load the Chocolate Alba page, not the fastest site in the world. And here's what we see: performance over past edition. And here are the 2026 categories: traceability, living income, child and forced labor, pesticides, right? Notice there's no gender and there's no farmer health category. But these have been 6 categories. These categories have not been consistent since the first scorecard, and their order has changed. And because I'm a total geek about these things, I actually went and looked it up and created a table. So here we have the name of the category, right down this column, and the year that category name was used. This NR means non-retrievable. And by non-retrievable, it turns out that there is no archive anywhere of the 2024 or the 2025 scorecards. So I went to the Wayback Machine, and here is the 2022 scorecard. The reason why I can download it is that there's a PDF of it, right? But there's a lot of JavaScript on the page, and so I assume there's a lot of JavaScript on the page, or they're didn't scrub the images or something like that. But if I go and take a look at the captures, right, and then I go take a look at the 2026 captures, and I go look at, I like April 1, right? So this is fine, but you'll notice that the page is blinking. And the reason why the page is blinking, and it will run it, right, it may run through a couple of links until it starts. But let's go to the scorecards page, right? And there's nothing on the page, right? I can't go to I can't go retrieve the 2025 results. I can't go retrieve the 2024 results. This is because the people at Be Slavery Free went to this JavaScript format for everything. And it turns out that it's a mess. This is what the JavaScript of the page, this is what the HTML of the scorecard page looks like right now. And if we actually go and take a look at it in depth, it's garbage, right? And it's like, I don't know if they're deliberately obfuscating it, but there's a lot of stuff going on here that we can't figure out. And so it's next to impossible, given everything we know, to go through and say, how do we go about understanding what's going on, right? So number one is this table sort of suggests that these categories have been the same categories since the very beginning, and they have not. If we go and take a look at the post, we'll find out that in year 1, right, 2020, one of the categories in position 1 was supports regulation, and that hasn't been used since 2020. In 2021, supports regulation was changed to due diligence. Are they the same things? Do they mean the same things? Is the methodology which supports them the same? We don't know, right? But it was used 1 year and has never been replaced. So in 2020, position number 2 was traceability and transparency. Position number 3 was deforestation, but deforestation was replaced with deforestation and climate in 2021, and then deforestation and climate was changed again and replaced with deforestation again because it was agroforestry and climate. And so this presentation of the categories is completely misleading. It's not the same thing. We also don't know because it doesn't say, right, that what are these things weighted. Now, there was a weighting given, I believe it was during either the 2022 or for the 22 or the 2023 scorecard, that traceability and transparency was worth 20% and living income was worth 20%, right? But there's an implication here that traceability and transparency is the most important. Living income is the second most important. Child and forced labor is third most important, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is this, we don't know, right? And, for example, we have here chemical management was not part of the first 2 scorecards. It became important during the third scorecard, but it was replaced with pesticides in the 2026 scorecard, which makes me wonder, fertilizers are no longer important here. So agrochemicals cover everything, and now we're only interested in pesticides? I don't understand. And then gender and farmer health were added this year. So there's now a 7th category, which was not added. And so at least they're not, saying gender is here. There's another challenge that we have with this. So let's go back to this page. Oh, actually, we don't know. Let's return because we don't need to go back to this page. Let's go up here. What we'll do is that overall score of 85, ranking 1 out of 34. And what we do is for each of the 8 categories now, gender is a 7th, and overall, I don't know why I need to duplicate that. Makes no sense to me, right? Is that 86 out of 86 out of 100, 86 out of 100, 92 out of 100, 78. But what's important to understand here is that this green range is 100 to 75. The next range, yellow range, is 74 to 50. The range down from that is 49 to 25. The lowest range, red, is 24 to 0, right? And so when we look at this, it says from the 6th edition to the 7th edition, right, there was no change from green to green. But we don't actually know if there was a change in the positive direction or if there was a change in the negative direction. They scored, 86 on traceability and transparency. Maybe they scored 91 last year, and so they actually went down. So this is a put. This symbol here says there was a push, right? They went from green to green, so there was no change. But we actually cannot compare the scores, and we don't actually have the overall number, right, for each of these. So why not? I mean, this is trivial given the amount of work that they're being done to get to this point, and yet we can't get the numbers. We certainly can't get the numbers for the 6th edition and the 5th edition. What we can do, right, is because of the nature of the internet, this is the 2020 scorecard. And so if I wanted to, I could probably use an LLM. If I were to convert these pages to JPEGs, I could extract the text out of the JPEGs. They're PDFs. I could probably extract the PDFs. But there are questions about, colors and things like that I can't get to. And by the way, if I look at these closely, there are no numbers here, right? These are just green. We don't know what green means, right? It's just green, right? And so we've got Alter Eco as a company. There's a brand here. That's really cool because I can associate with a company, for example, Chocolate Alba, a product that they might make, right? There's also, this will become Valrhona is owned by Group Savencia. And if we were to look at this year's scorecard, we'll say, oh, well, this company is part of this company. So there's no mention of ownership or those kinds of relationships. So for example, Tony's Chocolate Only scores very highly, right? But their chocolate is made from them by Barry Callebaut. And there is no disclosure of these relationships between companies that are rated on the scorecard. And if I was decided not to do business with Barry Callebaut because they got a low rating, maybe I don't want to do business with Tony's Chocolate Only, right? And because I don't want to do business with any company, right, that I can identify that uses Barry Callebaut as a sourcing partner. So there are lots of things going on here that we can go take a look at. Another thing that you'll find out is that in 2020, they didn't include this company did not respond, right? So they only list companies that did respond, and they gave them different ratings. And I just want to point out that, again, if we were to go look at this year's scorecard, Simois is misspelled. If we were to go and look at this year's scorecard, they misspelled Mondelez in terms of leaving out accent characters. I mean, the Hershey Company is the full name of the corporation. It's not Hershey's. So they use the logo. We can see there's an accent over Mondelez, so that rather than Mondelez. But it is the Hershey Company, not Hershey's. And so there's a lack of inconsistency. There's a lack of inconsistency there. If I go and look at the 2021 scorecard, we see that we have 4 categories rather than 3 categories from the previous year. And now we've got a description of what it is that they mean from a score key. But we have changed the number of scores from 4 to 6. If we come down here, now we can understand that there are different companies, types of companies on the list. So we can see that Barry Callebaut is a manufacturer, and that other companies may be cocoa traders. Do we have a cocoa trader on this list? We do. Sucden. I think of Tutan. Touton more as a trader than a manufacturer. That's my interpretation of what it is that they do. But if we were to go take a look at the scorecard for this year, what we'll do is we'll see that there's no indication of what kind of company this is, right? And we can't actually filter by activity. We can't just say, show me all the traders. Show me all the manufacturers, right? I have to go to show me all the retailers. I mean, there's no way to get all this data. But by the way, looking at the HTML, all the data is in this one page, right? These are just, JavaScript commands which take the data and display it in particular ways, right? All the data for this page is in one page. We're not going from page to page to page here. So all the data should be there. So that's really important to know, right, in terms of figuring this stuff out. So we can get the 2026 data, right? We can't get the 2025 data or the 2024 data. We don't know if there were any changes in category structure between 2023 and 2026. So did 26, 5, and 4 have the same category structure? We don't know this. I mean, one of the things that I'm going to do, and they make it really difficult. If I were to go look at Alba, I look at the URL for this arrow and it says 52. And I look at this one and it says 76. And I look at this one and it says 71. So there's no things like, oh, right, this is chocolatescorecard.com/scorecard/Alba, right, /Tony's, /Rittersport, /Semois, /Mars Wrigley. There's no way to programmatically go take everything on this page and then go to the next page, or to grab a list of URLs, right? Or infer what the URL might be in order to be able to go to the page and grab the data. I mean, if I look at the way the page is constructed here, and again, I apologize, the site is very, very slow for some reason, that I know that this 86 here is a number on the page, right? And what I can do is I can take, this is probably best for Claude, I would guess, and I could say, oh, I've got this company, Alba, and on the page there's a headquarters, and below it there's Switzerland, and then there's product lines, and then there's a type, right? And then I can say this 85%, right? So I can get the what is the ranking, and then I can go get these numbers, and I can create a table, right? And once I do it for one, if I know the URLs, I can do this for every single other one of the companies that are in there in the world. So it can't be done. They just make it harder than necessary, and they do not publish an archival data set. There's no way to get at this information other than from this page. So because the 2024 and 2025 scorecards use this format, the data associated with the results is no longer available. You cannot go to the Wayback Machine and retrieve it. The data are not there, right? So that's a problem, right? And I've got a lot of things to say about that. People who know me know that I'm not a huge fan of Tony's Chocolate Lonely, the way they put together the reports. But one thing that I will say about Tony's, let me go here and talk about it. Let me just click on the right URL. One thing I will say about Tony's is here's the 2024, 2025 report. If I want to download it, I can. If I want to download the 2023 report, I can. Or 3-4 report, if I want to download any of the reports historically, I can, right? And by the way, I have, right? And while the reports themselves are in a format that make them impossible to decode, right? Even at the very, very highest level, if I want to go pick out any data from them, it's just insanely difficult. Each one needs to be picked over manually in order to get it done. At least it's available. And so, by the way, if anybody is familiar with any of this, and we'll do this a little later, hey, here is the kit. This is the Royal Tropical Institute in the Netherlands. They did a study, I want to think 2018, 2019, something around that, which is called, I'm sorry, I'm looking at this on the wrong page. So let me go back to the right page. Gotta be careful. So this is the report demystifying the cocoa sector in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. One of the things that Kit did is they published the complete data set. And if you want to go to the data set, you can go and download the data set. You can manipulate it online. There are tools to manipulate it online. And so, hey guys at Be Slavery Free, if you want me to take you seriously, and I think if you want the industry to take you seriously, you need to publish all your data for all your years in a data set, right? With scores, with everything else that will enable people to do some independent assessment of what it is that you're doing. And I'll get to that later. Right? But it's hugely important, right? Because this is for a company that's talking about traceability and transparency. There's no traceability or transparency in what it is that they're doing. So here, again, here's the performance over past editions. I showed it to you live. I put it on the page if you want to look at it. But, we don't know. This third edition, was this a jump of 50 points from the third edition? Was it down at red? So was it down at 10, right? And it went to 90? We don't know anything about this. So we don't know. What has the rate of improvement been in living income over the course of these years? How do we determine, how did we assess that these guys were doing a good thing when it came to living income? That's not in the not in the methodology. What is it? Anyway, right? So, and one of the things that I did do here for you, right, so you can do it, is that the scale, right, green is 75 to 100, yellow is 50 to 74, orange is 25 to 49, so you can understand. So I got a question. How are the ranges in the terminology used to describe them determined? So for example, not willing to be assessed indicates a lack of transparency. I got lots to say on that, right? But, right, not willing to be assessed indicates a lack of transparency. This is them making a judgment about motivations, which cannot be universally true, right? It may be true in some instances, right? But I can think of at least one reason why somebody might say, I'm going to decline to participate. Right? In any event, when it comes to right, just thinking about this is the historical context of what's going on, right, and just looking at things, right. So a couple of things: is it unreasonable to demand that Bee Slavery Fee be transparent and traceable in their reporting? I think the answer is no. Right? What can we reasonably infer from the lack of transparency that is plainly evident in what is reported and how it is presented? And I will do the normative thing and use their terminology, which is not willing to be assessed, indicates a lack of transparency. Right? I'm just going to use your language to describe what you're doing, Fuzz and Carolyn and everybody associated with this project. Right? You are not willing to be assessed. Right? And therefore, that indicates a lack of transparency. There's no traceability in where you get your information. There's nothing, right? Apart from the group of people who are, and I listen, you are dependent upon these companies to participate in this project, right? If Barry Callebaut decides it doesn't want to participate with you, if Chocolate Alba doesn't want to participate with you, you're nowhere, right? And so you can only go so far in terms of demanding things and stuff like that. I get it. You guys are hobbled, but that's a problem with the methodology, right? There's a problem with what it is that you're trying to do and how it is that you're trying to do it, right? And you're not, in my opinion, using your own language, right? I would say, hey, you, Bee Savory Free, are not willing to be assessed, which indicates a lack of transparency. You're free to dispute. Come on, I'm happy to give you an hour, right, that we can discuss these things, right, and see if we can come to resolution on them. But given what it is that you publish, right, and the email that I get from you and how you describe it, this is my independent assessment of what's going on. All right, so if anybody wants to know, again, part of the historical context, I have done a look at the 2022, the 2023, the 2024, and the 2025 scorecards. I did not do the manual job of grabbing all the data from the 2024 and the 2025 scorecards. In hindsight, I probably should have. But let's go back here again, right? So here I am again at the 2022 scorecard. And what I do, and this is part of a trend that I've noticed, is that there's less and less information that they're publishing. So in the 2026 scorecard, I don't have any idea of what they are until I go to a subpage. And I think that's a problem because I would like to be able to support how many of these are traders, how many of these are manufacturers. Cargill, a processor as well. They're not just a manufacturer because they do a lot of derivatives only to people. All right. So, and then they do finished chocolate for other people, but they're not just a manufacturer, they're a processor. They're also a trader. So Econ is also a trader. They're also a processor. So their categorizations here in the 2022, 2021 scorecard are in fact pretty naive. If I go to the 2022 scorecard, all of a sudden we've added another scoring category. Did not respond to survey, lacking in transparency, right? Again, so this is naming and shaming, right? Which is they've done, this indicates a lack of transparency, and I'll get into something, right? They've also changed what these things mean. Starting to implement new policies needs more work. This one needs to catch up with the industry, hasn't changed much. But notice, beyond good, alter ego. That alter ego, that raises another interesting question. So if we go to the scorecard and we go back to the homepage, right? And then we go to the small companies because both alter ego and beyond good would be small companies. Oh my gosh, they're not listed anymore, right? So what's going on? Did they decide not to respond to your survey? Did you not even reach out to them? They've been a stalwart in ranking very high in previous years, but all of a sudden they're not on the list. And only 5 small makers? Really, I mean, I gotta believe that you reached out to more than 5. There are more than 5 of small, quote unquote, small makers in the world. And by the way, Original Beans, they're not a manufacturer. The manufacturer for them is being done by Felklin. And so is Felklin a medium and large company? The answer is Felch. Felklin is not there. So there, it is a real challenge to understand how the targets for this were selected, right? And then we've got, we've got a number of companies. So of these 34 companies, how many were green? How many were yellow? How many were orange? How many were red? And how many were gray? And if I were to go and look at this, I would say, oh my gosh, 100% of the small companies decided to respond. What do we know about that? What can we infer from that? The answer is absolutely nothing, because we don't know anything about how these companies were selected. And if people chose not to respond, and for some reason they didn't get the dreaded gray bunny or gray whatever it is over here, right? The retailers, I mean, it's like a huge percentage of them decided not to respond for one reason or another. And I got a whole other issue. So Target USA, maybe Target USA is there because Kmart Target Australia is here, but Family Mart is in Japan. It's not listed. I don't understand why not. You got a huge, I mean, where's Carrefour here? I mean, maybe they're in some larger holding company, but Royal Ahold Delhaize, where are they located? Where's Coop located? System U. I mean, Aldi Group, Aldi South Group, but where's Aldi? Aldi Nord. Well, it's like, oh, there's Carrefour. Sorry, because they're not in alphabetical order. They're in scoring order. But some of these things are given geographical, and some are not. Albertsons is in the U.S. I have no idea where Casino is, and the answer is why not? Right? And we have a similar kind of thing here. So Simois, again, misspelled, missing the accent, is part of Berigny, but we don't know where in the world these guys are located. So Beyond Beans, ETG, and we don't know if they're processors or traders or manufacturers or what they're doing. Sukden Cocoa, we could probably infer that they're a trader. If we were to go to their page, we'd find out that they're a trader. But I would like to be able to organize these things. Right? And it's also impossible to go and filter by, I don't know that it's true. I need to figure that out. I'm not going to say that. But complex filtering may be a challenge here. But I can only filter within the company. So I can filter, is that true? Filter by company or brand. These are all limited to the current view, the current tab view. So I can't say, show me filter by scorecard key, leading the industry, and it only shows medium and large companies, right? So yeah, it's a real challenge. They do say, why is Co-op on this list? Because Co-op and Alba are working with each other. But I also filter by position, top 20. That makes sense. Coop, right? Yeah, so you can do complex filtering, right? Which is helpful, but I have to go and there's no combined, there's no all here, which I think that there should be, which would make parts of this easier. And we got, I mean, again, this was a deep dive. We got about 5 minutes left. There's a lot to do. So this is looking at the team, right? And this is just the people. So I know that Carolyn Fuzz Kiddo are with Be Slavery Free. Here's a URL, but go and take a look at all these people, right? Carolyn Kitto, I know that she's with Be Slavery Free. Here's what they're doing. So I've assigned a URL. I happen to know Anthony personally, right? And I know he's what they're doing. So this double asterisk means I assigned it there, right? And I've got his URL. Again, I believe that this is misspelled, unless since we talked, they've Pavithra. No, they've got it misspelled still. So it's still Pavritha, All right, so I don't know what that's all about, right? But for example, we've got again, Friedel Fritz Adams is works for Sudowind, which is an NGO partner. And oh, by the way, if we go and take a look at the 2022 scorecard, I believe it is, we go down here to the bottom, and I know I did a screen capture of it, but we're going down here, and oh my gosh, here at the bottom of the 2022 scorecard, we can say that associated with Be Slavery Free are these people, associated with Macquarie University is this person, the Open University is this person, the University of Wollongong, oh, and with Forest. So we actually have, in some respects, and here we go, Friedel Fritz Adams is with Sudowind Institute, Anthony is Voice Network. They have started reporting less information as the scorecard goes on. I don't understand why that could possibly make sense for what goes on. And then if we go look at the 2023 scorecard, we have a similar kind of thing that we find that, in the 2023 scorecard, there's only the discussion of the university partners. We don't have any discussion of who the consultants are and what they're doing, which is, again, I don't understand why that should possibly be the case. Right? So we'll go there. Again, I'm doing the work that I can to fulfill this, and I found some LinkedIn URLs for some of these people. Because I'm doing the work. And here's the screenshot from the 2022 scorecard. So there's a deep dive into the methodology, and I'm gonna let anybody who's watching this who wants to go and take a look themselves at the rest of this. I'm gonna start wrapping it up here. Here is what I got to say. The not willing to be assessed indicates a lack of transparency. That language is a non-supported normative judgment. I also think it's a narrative judgment, right, about motives, not a statement of fact about a company's performance or data quality. The language points with a very broad brush, and serving only, mixing metaphors, to poison the well, right? So, for example, right, I'm going to face everybody and say this, right? If I were the CEO of a company and I was approached by Be Slavery Free, right? I'm a small company, and there is a definition of how many metric tons of cocoa you need to be processing to fit into the medium, large, or small category, right? But if I were a company and I were approached by Be Slavery Free to participate in this, I could legitimately say to them, I don't find your methodology to be sound, right? I don't think that you have done anything to be able to defend the performance improvements that you say you demonstrate, right? I don't think you've demonstrated them. And therefore, because I don't believe in your methodology and I don't know what the impact is going to be because you haven't demonstrated any impact, I am not going to participate, right? And that's a completely legitimate reason for doing so, right? That has nothing to do with, indicates a lack of transparency. No, right? It has nothing to do with a lack of transparency on my part. It's just that you, Be Slavery Free, haven't demonstrated to me the value of what you're doing. You haven't demonstrated the effectiveness and the impact of the methodology. You haven't demonstrated to me that for the tens of hours or hundreds of hours I might be spending on doing this for you, right, that there's actually an impact on the ground. You haven't quantified it. You just don't know what's going on. And so the answer is, I don't want to participate, right? And so this poisoning the well, this damning of these companies for saying, well, I don't want to be a part of the scorecard, therefore I'm not being transparent, right, is complete and total BS, right? And you didn't do it. You didn't do it for the first years. So from 20 through 23, you didn't make that claim, right? And now all of a sudden you're doing, and I want to know why. I want to know why you're doing it, right? Fuzz, Carolyn, you want to talk to me about where that decision came from and who made it and who thought it was a good idea to shame companies? right? Maybe you think it's a good idea. Maybe you think that shaming companies is the one way to motivate them, right? But if I look at the history of who has responded to your shaming them, it's a pretty very low conversion rate. So a couple of ways to think about the methodology. The data source is entirely participant company self-reporting, right? The question design mixes genuine impact indicators with what could be considered policy theater. The scoring architecture is expert driven, but is subjective, right? So it's Be Slavery Free and their NGO partners and their consultants on the executive team saying, this is what we think we should be measuring, right? And the answer to that question is, has anybody outside this group, independent, no affiliation whatsoever, done any work to say, yeah, this methodology makes sense. You are in fact measuring what you say you're measuring, and it's good. I don't know that the scoring architecture and the methodology support what it is that they're doing. Again, the category structure, the normative choices are baked into the framing, right? So this is what we've decided, our key sustainability metrics, and this is what we're reporting on, right? There's a complete mismatch between what they talk about in terms of retailers and manufacturers, right? Farmer health is important, but it's not actually part of the scorecard, right? Right. So there's a methodology pros and cons shortlist, which I've listed here. So the methodology is a carefully constructed mirror of how the coordinators, the organizers of this, believe companies should behave and communicate it, evaluated through industry expert judgment on self-reported data. Importantly, they're not neutral. Be Slavery Free is not a neutral arbiter of what's going on, right? And the way the scorecard is constructed, the methodology and the presentation of it is not neutral either. It's really important to understand this is not a neutral, independent assessment, right? There is an agenda. There is an obvious, in my view, right, agenda here, right? And the question is, has any independent assessment been done to validate any portion of the methodology, right? Let alone the entire approach. Examining scorecards, we've done a little bit of that, right? So, but I encourage you to go through and go, wow, what am I being asked to believe and what's missing? This is the really important thing, is from a skeptical perspective, is what am I not being told? What's missing? What's not being reported, right? Where is my attention being diverted, right? And that's what we want to go and go do. But let's take a real quick look again in a couple of minutes because we've got the time, right? So on the Insights page, and by the way, listen, this is a link to the Insights page. And so if you'd like to go to the Insights page, you can go and you can follow it along. Here's the Insight page. You don't have to go hunt for it. It's here. I link to it directly. So this is a really interesting observation here. And let's zoom up on it a little bit. Maybe we can see it. So why the score shifted? And this has to do with farmer income, right? Living income is now the lowest scoring section of the scorecard. The average is only 30%. For some companies, the score drop reflects sharper measurements of programs that already existed, right? Blah, 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 blah. Most do not yet have a calculated benchmark, right? So what it says is that even with all the work the scorecard has been doing to expose the fact that living income is not a thing, there's been zero progress made, right? There's been zero progress that's been made on the subject of living incomes, right? And so when I look at the scorecard and I look at, I go to the scorecard, let's go to the scorecards, and I look at living income, this green here cannot be about implementation. It can only be about policy, right? And so what we have when it comes to what's going on with the insights is that this is a refutation that's basically saying the scorecard has had zero impact when it comes to living income, and the companies that we assessed, they're going backwards. And why? Well, maybe better reporting is the reason why we're going backwards. Now we're reporting on things we weren't reporting a couple of years ago. So, but we're saying that as an industry that we've completely failed. And why the score shifted? Well, it's a great explanation. It's still greenwashing. You're greenwashing here, in my opinion, right? So, and I say below it, this is perverse. Yes, I believe it is perverse. So here's, again, right? Has to do with the use of pesticides, toxic and unacceptable, right? The harm is real, the solutions exist. What are the solutions? Right? You don't even spend once, go to the page, go to the insights page, look under this toxic is unacceptable, and go say, do they propose solutions? The answer is no, they don't. Right? It's performative. This is entirely performatives, right? And oh, by the way, it doesn't cover fertilizers, and not all fertilizers are good, right? Do we want huge amounts of glyphosate, for example, or on cocoa trees? Maybe or maybe not. That's but right, there are inorganic and organic inorganic fertilizers. Why are they not included? Because they're just as dangerous when inhaled, if not applied properly. Why all of a sudden are we talking about pesticides and not agrochemicals generally? Right? I do not understand, right, why that stance has changed. It makes no sense to me. And the harm is real, the solution exists, is entirely performative. And oh, by the way, over here on the right, we still don't know what 34% of farmers earn. I'm going to believe it's a lot larger than 34%. And what I really want to know, and they don't talk about, what do the 66% of farmers that we know what they earn, what do they earn, right? And how has it changed since 2021, right, with the first scorecard, right? Come on, guys, you've been measuring living income since the first scorecard, right? How has it improved? 2020. You don't know, right? This is a completely performative statement, right? You do know what 66% of farmers earn. What is it? It's not included on the page. All right. So what does the insight page do, right? It does reflect some progress on traceability and deforestation-free sourcing. However, I would say this has nothing to do with the scorecard. And nothing to do. This is all EUDR. You just blame it or lay it on the EUDR for improvements on traceability and deforestation-free sourcing. They do hint on it, but this is the fact. The bee slavery-free, the chocolate scorecard has nothing to do with the improvements on traceability and deforestation. Right? It also underscores rightly that living income and child labor remain stubborn failures after decades of promise. Right? Yeah, tell us something we don't know. Tell us something we don't know. Just saying that there's been no progress is strictly performative, right? Right? It treats non-participation in the scorecard as a moral failure, right? Which is, I think, assigning motivation, which is toxic. I will say it. It's toxic. That by saying non-participation in the scorecard, by framing it as a moral failure, that's toxic. It puts most of the responsibility on brands and traders and far less on governments, marketing boards, and the macro level trade and fiscal structures. Oh, well, soukten, touton, you guys are responsible, right, for not being able to make changes in policy. Well, that may be because the governments of Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana and market structure. So the way the New York Exchange, the London Exchange, right, the way the futures exchanges are involved in the whole process, maybe they can't, right? But that's a sophisticated discussion that is going to go over the heads of most people, and you need to have simplistic answers that people can get onto. So again, one of the reasons I got a problem with this, right? And then finally, it blurs the line between what we can say with high confidence from sector-wide evidence and what our particular scoring system wants to reward. And this is a hidden problem that I mentioned from the very beginning, right? That the scoring framework represents a particular theory of change, right? And what they are doing is they're rewarding companies, right, whose policies reflect, right, the aspects of change that they reward. So it is this circular bit of reasoning, right? It is this echo chamber. It is a loop. And number one is we don't know what the impact of any of this is, right? Because there is no independent assessment of, what has gone on. There's just this, there's still problems in child labor, right? There's still child problems with living income. Yeah. Right? Tell us something we don't know. So again, they have a page called the Exploring the State of Cocoa. Again, there's a link directly to the page, so you don't have to take my word for it. Right? The cocoa poly crisis, climate shocks, price volatility, and persistent poverty. I've just highlighted one particular graphic here. Why are prices so volatile? The reasons are as heartbreaking as they are complex. So why are prices volatile? Climate change, okay? Illegal mining, probably needs to be plural, pests, because there's more than one pests and disease. I'm going to go take a look at this. Why are prices volatile? And I want to make one huge point here, which is what this does is it says that prices are volatile, and the reasons have nothing to do with the sourcing policies of big chocolate or what the market is doing, right? So could it be that collaboration between big chocolate companies and local governments and, negotiations of the fair trade price, right, which include these companies, could it be that, these companies, right, which control 90% of cocoa, right, because that's one of the claims that they make, could these companies be doing everything they can do to keep the price of cocoa as low as they possibly can, right? And it just got out of hand, right, with during 2024 when the price began raising and finally hit over $12,000 a metric ton, right? But what happened then was, right, climate change and illegal mining and pests and disease, right, are in fact reflective of, right, a larger problem, right, which there has been no systemic investment in cocoa farmers or cocoa and farming by big chocolate, right, since the last peak in the late 1970s, 1977, right? This was caused by industry sourcing problems, industry sourcing practices, the governments of the cocoa producing countries. This lays blame elsewhere. It's the mining industry that is completely responsible for volatility in pricing. Well, galamsey may be, which is a local term for it, may be an issue in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. Is it as much of an issue in Cameroon and Nigeria, or is it? These are really simplistic, but nowhere does it say, for 25 years, 40 years, So let's take it back. Since the signing of the Harkin-Engel Protocol, right, big chocolate, right, with the World Cocoa Foundation as a proxy for them, have not done anything to address, their voluntarily agreed to obligations to eradicate illegal labor in the cocoa supply chain, right? But instead have punted it down the road every time they run into a self-imposed deadline. It's 5 years from now, it's 10 years from now. And then they've got civil society organizations like Together Cocoa are going to solve the problem. It's like, no, that's not going to be. It's performative and normative as well, or it's collusory, right? So, and who gets to decide what living income is? Well, if big chocolate companies and cocoa traders get to decide what living income is that fair? I would say that it is not, right? So, but there's completely lacking any discussion about the culpability, right, of the companies on this list, the companies that control 90% of the cocoa being traded and the vast majority of chocolate products which are manufactured and sold. Volatility, they don't have any, there was no contribution by them. They have no responsibility. And that is so naive, right, that I looked at this and I'm going, they're greenwashing, right? This is the graphic that just completely convinced me that ultimately what it is that the Be Slavery Free Chocolate Scorecard is doing is greenwashing. But so, hey guys, I'm going to finish it up. We're going long. Calls to action. Number one, and this is to Fuzz and Carolyn, generally, anybody who's associated with this. Be transparent about your funding sources, right? I've got 4 funding sources. You mentioned them, but is the Chocolate Scorecard cost $1 million? Does it cost $2 million? How much does it cost? How much is this coming from, right? So improve transparency by providing links to companies, fixing all the NGO partner links. I mean, come on, that's lazy, right? If I could spend 15 minutes with an LLM script finding the holes in your list, I mean, first just to scrape the list and put it into a table and go, oh, that URL is malformed. Duh, right? That kind of data quality is rampant in the industry, or the lack of data quality, right? If you want us to take you seriously, take care of the little stuff. If you're not willing to take care of the little stuff, I look at the big stuff and I go, what the actual F, right, is going on here, right? And I've been calling this stuff out for months and years, and you haven't fixed any of it, right? So the team members, how come we don't know who the team members are associated with? You used to publish some of it. You don't publish any of it anymore. Why not? All right. And to companies' public reports related to the scorecard's rating and ranking efforts. Yeah, if Barry Callebaut produces an annual sustainability report, link to it. This is the one we used, right? Or here's what's going on. It's like, it's like all these companies, as a part of their, not the European regulations on corporate social responsibility reporting, right? There is a directive, corporate social responsibility reporting directive. That may not be the actual acronym, but this information is available. Hey guys, show us you've done your homework. Otherwise, this is just a black box. You've got some data, you got the scoring. We don't know anything. We don't know anything. We just have to take your word, right? It's trust us, bro. We haven't made any mistakes in our math, right? And we're actually measuring what we say we're measuring, and our questions and what we're measuring is actually has an impact and is useful and is meaningful, right? And you collect all this data and you force people like me and anybody who might be interested in going, what are some publicly available sources for the information that you're publishing? And you make me go and hunt for it. Bad move on your part. So a call to action: be transparent, not just about your funding sources and who's being paid, right? Improve transparency by providing links to companies. Identify and publicly acknowledge even potential conflicts of interest, especially potential funding conflicts of interest, when team members are asked to evaluate companies in the scorecard. Again, I am not saying that there is an issue, but the Voice Network does receive funding from Tony's Chocolonely Foundation, right? And Anthony Fountain, who's part of Voice Network, is one of your team members. And maybe this is what your ethics team is all about, right? And maybe that's what they do, but you're not reporting on it. And I am not suggesting that there is any undue influence which is being paid, but, right, you want to avoid even the appearance of conflicts of interest, right? And maybe every one of your members is asked to sign an ethical disclosure that says, we're not going to take into account when we do this. But if you want us to trust us, you need to do this. There's no transparency. There's no traceability. You got to go do that, right? Right. So call to action number 4, undergo an independent assessment of the methodology by disinterested third party or parties. Right? So have somebody who's not one of your NGO people, who's not at one of the university partners, who's not a part of what you're doing, who is in a completely different part of the world, go and say, yeah, the methodology is actually sound and it measures something useful. I would love to see that, right? Because I find a lot of the methodology that you're using problematic, right? The methodology itself and the way you report on it, and the fact that there's nothing foundational. Right? We just get to see a small snapshot of some of the final results. We don't know anything about what's going on, right? I also want you to commission independent market research about the effects your research, the scorecards, are having, right, on consumer purchasing behavior. Does this matter, right? If it doesn't matter, why continue doing it, right? If you want to get more people to participate, so there are fewer did not respond. If you want to get more companies to respond, show them that this makes a difference, right? If you can say that being on the scorecard on average, right, you can attribute a 10% increase in sales to being on the scorecard as opposed to not being on the scorecard, I'll bet you almost anything you care to name that the number of people who respond will increase, right? But you haven't done that, right? Because there's no And I wouldn't trust your methodology of market research. I want a completely independent market research company. You would give them the brief. How do we go about figuring out this stuff, and find some way to pay it, right? If you want, hey, I've got a really, really good market research company that I work with, and I'm sure that they could get to the background on this. Certainly in North America and Europe, maybe a little bit harder in other parts of the world, but we can certainly do it in the two major markets in the world, which is North America and Europe, right? Another thing that I want you to do immediately, don't wait, right? You can do this right now, is remove the shaming language, right? Related to a company deciding not to participate in the scorecard, right? Just remove it. It's beneath you, right? There's no reason for it to be in there. Just say, decided not to participate for one reason or another. Do not ascribe motivations. Oh, not willing to be transparent. It's like, give me a break, right? You can't do that, all right? And then finally, all right, publish complete data sets of non-confidential, non-proprietary information for every scorecard in a form that makes independent longitudinal assessment possible, right? The 2024 and 2025 results are inaccessible on the internet to the extent that I've been able to find, right? I can do a little work to say, oh, I can go to the PDFs for the first couple of years and grab their data, and I can go and manually grab, or if I can find a series of scripts that I can go and programmatically grab the data from this year's, and I'm going to do that to independently preserve the results from this year, right? And put everything into one large table to the extent that is possible. But publish complete data sets, right? There's a way to publish the scores and the rankings, if nothing else, right? The scores and the rankings for all of the years, to be able to, if you're going to normalize and regularize the category names, like why is it agrochemicals as opposed to pesticides, right? Why is it deforestation and climate here, and then it's deforestation there, and then it's agroforest and climate in other places? That's another issue that needs to be addressed. But it took me, half an hour to go and to generate my own table. But complete data sets. Preserve everything that you have published in a form, right, that makes it possible for somebody to load it up into a spreadsheet or to load it up into a database and run some analysis on what are the trends, right? Right now, there's no trending data, right? I know what was got this year, but I don't know how they scored any previous year, right? And so we don't know if there's a linear improvement, a nonlinear improvement. We don't know anything about that, and we can't assess it because all that data is hidden, right? So these are the 7 calls to action, right? Right. Some of them you can do immediately, right? And some of them are going to take a while, right? But if I think that in the interests of transparency and traceability, that's what you need to do. Be Slavery Free as an organization needs to do to put some academic rigor on what it is that you're doing, right? Because I don't see the academic rigor in what you're doing, right? So here's my Chocolate Life report card for the Chocolate Scorecard. Number 1, transparency and traceability, give them an F, right? There is a lack of links to publicly available information. I miss the published policies and reports, incomplete and incorrect links to NGO partners, non-existent links to team members, and no reporting around funding, right? So on that score, according to their own rubric, it's an F. Living income, pointing out that the problem still exists and more work needs to be done. Policy proposals, are there any policy proposals to hold companies accountable? No, F, right? Forced and child labor, again, pointing out the problem still exists and more work needs to be done. F, just pointing it out. Like, we've known that for 20 years, right? Deforestation, right? And climate, performative much? Yeah, there's an issue. Whatever, right? These are what policies that these people are doing, right? But you haven't demonstrated the value or the effect of their implementation of what they're doing, right? We still have these problems, right? Agroforestry and climate, the language changes. So deforestation change, it's like agroforestry and climate. It's like The rubrics have changed, the categories have changed, the methodologies have changed. There's no public discussion of how weighting has changed, how the changes in category names affects the methodology. We know nothing, right? The language changes unexplained between this and prior category, which is number 4, make longitudinal comparison impossible, right? Also, yeah, right, we got a problem. It's performative, right? Gender, well, this is the first year that they published anything around gender. And farmer health, we're going to give them incompletes and hope that they do a better job next year. But that is, right, my deep dive. And listen, it could have been gone on for much, 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 much longer if we did a deep dive into, specifically what is on the methodology page, specifically what is on the insights page, what specifically is on the other pages of the report. And what I encourage you to do is for you to do your own exploration, to look at these pages, right, and ask yourself the question, number 1, what's not being said, right? Right. And where is what they're saying, right, an excusegetic? Again, going back down here, scrolling. I mean, you might imagine I spent hours and hours and hours, right, doing this, right? But this is an excusegetic. Why the score shifted. This is an excusegetic, right? It's performative, right? They're highlighting a problem and they're making excuses for it, right? They're not saying, we done bad. Nobody has been able to find a way to solve the problem. We don't have any policy proposals, right? We represent all these other NGOs that are part of our partners. And together, we're just going to throw up our hands and we're going to blame Big Chocolate. And we have no impact on what it is that goes on. I mean, so why isn't FLO Fair Trade in here? Why isn't Rainforest Alliance being considered as a part of the challenge? I mean, I'll have to go look and see if Fair Trade specifically and Rainforest Alliance specifically are mentioned. But this is blame shifting, right? This is an excusegetic, which is a term that's used sometimes, right, to replace apologetic, right? So this is an excusegetic, and this one is just straight out performative, right? Pesticides are toxic and unacceptable. We've known this, right, since the beginning of the illegal child labor argument more than 20 years ago, right? But the harm is real. The solutions exist. Okay, if the solution exists, what are they? And why aren't they being implemented, right? There's nothing about that, right? Oh, we still do not know what 34% of farmers earn. What do 66% of farmers earn? Let us know, right? This is completely performative, right? And it's designed to shift blame from the companies that are responsible for sourcing 90% of cocoa beans to other things, illegal gold mining, right? Pests and disease, right? Give me a break, guys, right? This is an issue which you are completely, as it says here, greenwashing. And that's my final conclusion about what it is that the 2026, the 7th edition of the Chocolate Scorecard is. It's an attempt to greenwashing, right? And everything that they say should be taken with a grain of organic sea salt, maybe, or something. Not mine. My mining is bad, so we don't mine salt. So harvested lovingly from salt ponds somewhere by salt harvesters who earn a living wage. I'm being hyperbolic to some extent, but right, I'm also being completely serious about it at the same time. And I want you, right, to go and cast the same skeptical eye. What's missing? What they're not saying? Why are they trying to point us in this direction? Why do they make it so difficult to get the data out of the pages, right? There are ways to do this that make it incredibly easy, right? If I'm going to look at Chocolate Alba, why do they wait until I get to the subpage to say that, oh, right? They're are they a manufacturer? Either they're a manufacturer, are they a trader? Where do they fit? None of this is on the front page, which would enable me to sort them and make sense, right? Global position. Why is this so much? We've already heard like, oh, position 1 of 34, ranking 1 out of 34. Why do we need so much screen real estate taken on this? What is this? This is a chocolate glazed soccer torch? I understand. And oh, by the way, they're number one. Cool. But wouldn't it be nice if this was a navigation interface? Nope. We don't know anybody else who's in there. We can't get to anybody else. They did at least 34 of these suckers. So this took a while to do. The time and money spent on producing this graphic could have been better spent in a bunch of other places. Volume range, 1,000 to 10,099 tons. How come this is, right? This product line, it's a duplicate of this information out here, medium and large companies. How come this, right, volume range isn't up here? Why have I got this image? Why is this data produced this way? Performance over past edition. Why don't I actually have the scores from previous years? Why? Because the scores would tell a story that they don't want to be told, right? Is the reason I would infer, right, that these are not here. It's like, oh, have these numbers improved over these 4 years? Have they stayed the same? It's like, right? Take and look at these things with real skeptical eyes and ask yourself if you're being pointed in a particular direction, if your attention is being pointed in a particular direction away from certain things, right? My thought is, if you give any thoughtful time to what it is that's going on, you'll determine that this is a real problem, right? And with that, I'm done. This might be one of the longest solo episodes of Pod Safe Chocolate I've ever done. I thought this topic was really important, right? That I discuss, right? And that people seriously take a look at what it is that we're being asked to believe and make actionable decisions on. So we're supposed to decide that we should buy our chocolate from Coop or Co-op rather than Aldi because of this score that they get. Or we're supposed to buy Tony's Chocolonely when we don't know that Barry Callebaut is their manufacturing partner. That should be disclosed, and it's not, right? And the question is, why is it not being disclosed? Why are some parent relationships disclosed and not others, right? Why is Alter Eco, which was a staple of the first couple of the years of the scorecard, not included this year? And if they're not included, was it because they weren't asked or because they were refused? And if they were refused, how come you didn't shame them for not being willing to participate? Oh, by the way, Alter Eco is a part of Chocolat's Alba. At least Alba has been doing their manufacturing for them. Maybe that's a reason why I have no idea, but there's no history. There's no continuity, right? But I'm going to end it there and say that this episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. This is the homepage of the Chocolate right now. To join, all you have to do is click the join button, right? There has always been a free membership tier. I will send maybe one, maybe two emails a month, usually never more than 2 emails a month. And there is member-only content that you can get to. And if you go to the homepage, you'll see some things that are tagged members. That's just for you, right? Just for members. As you might imagine, I spent hours and hours and hours putting together, going through and reviewing everything for today's episode of Pod Safe Chocolate. So if you do have the financial resources to support the work that I do for as little as $5 a month or $42 a year, your support goes a long way to making sure that I can continue my work producing episodes of Pod Safe Chocolate and keeping the Chocolate Life on the air. At above the Team TCL Leader level and above, these come with coaching and consulting hours. So if you like what it is that I did today, if you like the work that I do, the thoroughness, the way I pay attention to things, your financial support will go a long way. And you can get my insight, my experience, my expertise, and we can apply it to your business and to your business problems. Just let me know. All right, when you sign up, I will see. And with that, I want to say thank you, everybody, for being here, and to wish everybody a good rest of Friday. If you're watching this live, have a great weekend, and to remind everybody that if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Until the next time, everyone, ciao.